Arnold did improve year by year. If you think, the Arnold that beat Sergio originally in 1970 was so much better in 74, 73 Arnold. Sergio was fantastic, but did he progress year by year after a certain time? I don't think so.
Yeah. And Arnold in 1973, after that controversial 72, he came back to 73 better than ever. I mean, 73 and 74 were his best years. But, but the thing about 73 is, too, that's when they wrote the book Pumping Iron. So Charles Gaines and George Butler were in New York to watch that 73 Olympia. If Sergio would have been in that, he would have been part of the book. So he really missed a great opportunity to really get publicity. And then they probably would have put him in the movie. They probably would have wanted to be in the movie too. So he really missed by sitting out 73.
I think 73 to 75 Olympias, I think would have been additionally special if Sergio had been there as well, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, because he had the personality. He was really something to see, and he had the personality and the charisma that Arnold had. So it would have really made for a much greater addition to the book and movie.
Did you ever train with either Sergio or Arnold, John?
No. I was too young, I think, when Sergio was around in Chicago. But I did see him guest pose once, and I saw him a lot at the competitions. Like I said, he would always be there handing out trophies and stuff.
Peter? Anything to add, Peter?
No, I never competed with them.
No, I said anything to add, Peter.
They were frightened. They retired before
before you hit your stride
into the swing.
Okay, then, guys. Right, let's talk about the next topic. This is a topic you both came up with: the 1983 win of Samir Banu. You both had different kind of slants on the subject of Samir winning '83. So tell us your thoughts.
Sorry, who are you asking, John?
Yeah, you, Peter, first.
I think as time goes by, there's two things happening. We're moving into an age now where, bodybuilders, for the most part, even at the professional level, are, for want of a better word, bulkier than they used to be. The streamlined waist and the serratus and the vacuum isn't as important. And the more I see photos of Samir now, particularly in 1983 when he won the Olympia, I'm almost getting to the point of thinking, is that the ideal physique? Everything is there. He was superbly defined. He was in proportion. He was dry as a bone. He was full, and he was only 200 pounds. I mean, I saw a shot just yesterday that he put up. He's doing a kneeling shot, and he's putting his arm out almost straight, and yet the bicep is there. I mean, it's just a tremendous shot. The sort of cleanness of the muscles and everything. That do we go back and say, is that the classic physique? Is that the best physique? I never felt like that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but as I go by, I think that was a really, really complete physique that he hit it on the nail that one year. In fact, he hit it on the nail in '82, but didn't get rewarded for it. And again in '85 at the WABA World Championships, he was tremendous. So Samir is, I look back on that physique and think, wow, that really was a hell of a physique that, to me, has got better after time as you reflect on the shots from 35 years ago.
John, would you say that at that Olympia that he won in 1983, would you say that was the greatest bodybuilding back ever seen to that point?
Possibly. 1980 was really a fantastic show too. You had a lot of great champions on stage all at once in 1980. But what was interesting to me about 1983 was the judging, because you had such a different variety of physiques on stage. And there was, of course, no classical physique back then. And there was no weight divisions. It was just one class. So you had Samir, who had a great classic physique. And then you had Mohammed Makaway, who, again, a smaller guy, really ripped, very classical posing. And then you had Frank Zane in his last competition, who was not at his best, a little lighter, but very ripped. And then you had guys like Bertil Fox, who was massive, super big, and then probably at his best shape ever. And then you had Lee Haney competing in his first Olympia, who was not really at his best, but he was definitely a bigger guy.
23 years old he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had this combination of big guys and more symmetrical guys, and they were all on stage, and the judges had to pick who was the best. And you look at the way it was laid out. Samir took first, McGough took second, Lee Haney was third, Zane was fourth, and Bertil Fox was fifth. So you had the big guys in the classical physiques sort of interspersed. So that was a show where the judges were really taking into account every round. They were really looking at the symmetry round, then they were looking at the muscularity round, and they were also judging the posing round. So that's why someone like McGough could go all the way up to second, because his posing was so good. So it was really an interesting contest from that perspective. And then after that, you know, a few years down the road, it became more about size. But if you go back to '83, it was still being judged with that symmetry and shape and the posing ability in mind. So it was really unique.
Did you agree with the top five, Peter?
Yeah, I would have had Bertil a bit higher. You know, I think he was. Where would I have had him? Yeah, I think he would have been ahead of Zane and been pushing Haney. He really would. I mean, you got to remember Arnold was in the audience, and when Bertil had finished, he stood up and said, "That is Mr. Olympia." You know, he declared this to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, because it was you know, you see the video of 1983, and Fox is absolutely amazing. You know, never really hit that peak again, and maybe that's, you know, it sort of deflated him a little bit, because I think he should have definitely been higher. And a lot of people saying he should have won, like Arnold said. So, you know, that wouldn't have helped his mood. You know.
Were you at that, Mr. Olympia, to the both of you?
I was
there. Yeah.
You were there.
Yeah, and it was a tremendous contest. I mean, Albert Busek promoted it in Munich, Germany, at the Olympia Hall, where they did the Olympics in '72. So it was a really prestigious contest, and funnily enough, it's how you remember certain things. James Gobert, who was lightweight champion of the world in same year as Lee Haney won in '82. He didn't finish in the top 10, but when he walked out, I thought, what is wrong with that physique? It was so neat and so put together. You know, this lightweight guy, everybody was in shape. That's the big thing about the contest then. You know, I tend to get a feeling as we watch Olympias, not just recent ones, but even going back 20 years, you get a lineup of 15 or 16 guys, and you think, wow, they're all going to be in shape. And then in the end, only 4 or 5 are really in shape. Back then, it was the other way around. You know, there'd be 15 guys, and 3 or 4 of them maybe weren't in top shape. You know, maybe it's something to do with, maybe you do too much to prepare for a contest these days. You know, tinkering around at the last minute, it doesn't always work out.
What was the response to the feeling when Lee Haney did you guys straight away say, this guy he's going to be one of the greatest of all time?
Yeah, well, he started off really strong. I mean, when he came in and won the Nationals and then the Universe, I think everybody was impressed with his physique. But then when he went to the pro division, I remember watching I think it was the Pro World Championships on TV. It was on television, and McGough won that. And I think DeFaro got second and Lee got third, but Robbie Robinson was fourth. And I remember in the pose down, Lee Haney posing next to Robbie, and I was like, man, he made Robbie look small. You know, they got the same kind of physiques, but he made Robbie look small. And then he won the Night of the Champions, and he took third in his first Olympia. So it was obvious this guy was going to be a superstar in the sport. He just had it all. He had that small waist. He was a real big guy. He knew how to pose. He had a really pleasant demeanor also on stage. You know, he wanted to win, but he was always smiling. And I'll never forget, after his first Olympia, they had a bunch of Grand Prix, and McAway won them all. And I think they had like 3 or 4 of them. And I think Bertil Fox actually beat Lee in the first one. But then after that one, I think Bertil Fox might have dropped out, and Haney was taking second. And at the last one in London, Haney had really improved every one, and he was more ripped, and a lot of people thought he could have beat the smaller McAway, and McAway won, and Lee picked him up in his arms. And it was a photo that made all the magazines, and that just showed this guy acts like a champion even when he loses. Yeah. So you could see the fact that this guy was going to be a great champion.
So at 23 years old, was he the biggest guy on stage at the 1983 Mr. Olympia?
He would have been close to it. I mean, I always remember when he did pick McCowie up. The obvious photo caption was Muhammad goes to the mountain. And the thing about Lee was that year, 83, he came back in 84. He was 8 or 9 pounds heavier, maybe 10 pounds.
Yeah.
His arms had improved. He'd improved, and he came in as hard as hell in New York. As soon as he walked out, it was like, it's done. There's nobody going to beat this guy tonight. He was so rock hard and full. In fact, he wasn't as good the following year in 85. He was much better in 84.
Really?
Yeah, my opinion. Yeah. Well, a lot of people's opinion, because Al Beckles was second in 85, and there were some people saying, Al pushed him more than was probably should have been the case a year before. He wouldn't have pushed him as hard as that. Yeah.
One question I'd like to ask, because the year after, I've seen the video of the 1984 Olympia, and Samir, he was 5th place, wasn't he? Sixth. 5th or 6th. Yeah, and I remember he obviously wasn't very happy being the reigning Mr. Olympia, because to me he looked almost as good as he did when he won the year before. Well, did you agree with that placing?
No, I think he was unfairly placed. He was definitely not as good as 83. I think he tried to come in a little bit bigger, and then he lost. The thing about Samir was he had that beautiful symmetry of small waist. So when he tried to come in bigger, he ruined his lines, and he was a little bit off in 84. But I thought that was pretty harsh, taking a reigning Mr. Olympia and going all the way down to 6th. I mean, he wasn't that far off. So I thought he should have been 3rd, maybe 4th at the worst.
Peter?
Yeah, I would have had him up there. I would have had him better than Wilcosh, who was 3rd, I believe, wasn't he? Yeah. It was. You've got to remember. I mean, Samir won the Olympia, and then I'm not saying he got distracted, but he was a busy man for a year. And maybe he didn't come in looking the same as he did in 83. And, often that sort of counts against you. You're judged against your best rather than how you look on the day against other guys who are on stage.
I think what happens is when they become Mr. Olympia, they're just either inundated, they're in demand. I think the same happened with Jay Cutler in 2006. He came back in 2007, and he really wasn't as good as he was any of the previous years, even when he was getting second to Ronnie Coleman. And he kind of, it's like, I think maybe they're taking guest appearances and stuff, and they're doing it leaving it too late just to kind of, because obviously there's a lot of opportunity coming their way. And I think sometimes they do get a little bit distracted, possibly. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, and Samir wouldn't mind us saying that. Samir was the guy who was always involved. He always wanted to be something happening. He wasn't a recluse, so he would get involved in things, out of a sense of fun or being busy, or he used to love the attention. So, he wasn't somebody who hid himself away. He was out there to show, I'm Mr. Olympia and I'm proud of it, and rightly so.
And he's still training so hard and still so passionate and still doing ab selfies on Instagram. It's I think it's amazing to see that all these years later, the guy's still got the passion burning bright,
Yeah, he loves bodybuilding. There's no doubt about it. He really does. Well, one of the things about Samir, I mean, I had a mixed relationship with him in the early days, but it's all settled down now.
You sure?
He until he sees this interview. I'm trying to think if I know anybody who can assess a physique better. And I don't mean just top physiques. I mean, if you're sitting at the Nationals with him and a guy comes on who's going to be 8th or 9th, he'll analyse that guy and tell you exactly what he needs to do, what's out of balance, what's this. He's got that eye, and his knowledge of bodybuilders. He's one of those guys you can hold up silhouettes of guys, and he knows them all. You know, you can't fool him with anything. He's really deep-seated a fan of bodybuilding, and he's always willing to give praise where praise is due. You know, he's not bitching about things.
And does a very good impression of Joe Weider.
Oh, he does, yeah.
Yeah.
I've said it before, he does a good one of Ben Weider as well, and does them both together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, then let's go on to the final subject we're going to talk about in this Olympia history segment. It's the 1995 Mr. Olympia. That was Dorian's 92, 93. That was Dorian's fourth Olympia win. And tell us, Peter, why it was so special, that particular Mr. Olympia.
Well, it was the 30th anniversary of the Olympia, so it was thought that it would be a nice touch to get all the Mr. Olympias. There was only 9 up to that point on stage at the same time. And of course, the big catch would be Arnold. Now, Arnold was in the middle of making the movie Eraser, and the Olympia was in Atlanta that year. And he agreed to come. He took a private flight out there. But I was backstage all the time. He was supposed to arrive before the evening, and that the evening would open with all the Mr. Olympias being presented. But he was in New York to do wardrobe fittings, and it got later and later and later. And he didn't arrive till sometime after 9 o'clock. Wayne DeMille just kept on, let's put it on hold, and run the contest, you know. And I'll always remember this, you know, Arnold came back, and Wayne said, okay, thank you very much for coming. So we're going to introduce all the other guys, and then we're going to bring you out last because you made this special, you know, effort to be here. And I've got it written down. Arnold said, no, why don't we all just stand there behind the curtain in the order that we won the title, and then raise the curtain so the crowd can see us all lined up at once. I don't want to be presented as someone special. I have no ego in this. I'm just one of the 9, which was tremendous. You know, that was, maybe Arnold wouldn't have done that 10 years before. He would have been, I'll be the center of attraction.
Yeah.
But that's what made it, you know, they all came out, and there's Larry Scott, then there's Sergio, then there's Arnold, then there's Franco, then there's Zane, then there's Dickerson, you know, they're all there, right up to Dorian Yates, who was competing in the contest. He was the last one on. And they were all, Joe Weider was there. Joe Weider spoke about them, gave a little anecdote about each of the guys. They gave an anecdote about Joe, what Joe meant to the Olympia. And it really was a tremendous, tremendous night. You know, a lot of people just stood there in awe, like, wow, you'll never see this again. And we never did see it again. Oh. There were other occasions where multiple Mr. Olympias were lined up, but not all of them that won. And of course, now it's not possible because Joe's not here, Larry Scott's not here, Sergio's not here. So that was just a one-off unique experience. And I sort of look upon it as one of the greatest nights I've ever witnessed in bodybuilding, you know. I just remember it all. And Franco was the funniest because he told a story about how they tried to get Joe to drink wine as they asked him for a pay rise. And Joe sort of said something like, well, if you deadlift 700 pounds, you can have the pay rise. And Franco did it, but Joe said to him, you're actually a lazy bastard, Franco. This was Franco telling the story, you know. And he sussed out that they were trying to fool him to get the rise, you know. And but of course, Franco telling a story is much funnier than me relating it. If you get the tape, you know, it's very, very funny. And all the guys were talking about Joe. A really warm experience, you know.
Yeah.
Were you there, John?
No, I wish I would have, because I was going to a lot of those shows back then. I wish I would have made the trip. If I would have known they were going to do that, I'm sure I would have. Because, you know, those old days of bodybuilding are my favorite. But like Peter said, that really was a great experience when they just raised that curtain. And I think the audience just took in everybody, and they're like, oh, my God, Arnold's here, too. You know, and it was just it was like a once-in-a-lifetime experience because, like you said, it'll never happen again now because we've lost 3 of those Mr. Olympias already, and we lost Joe Weider as well. So it really was a magical experience.
So no one knew that was going to happen before it happened?
No.
No, it wasn't announced, and certainly the crowd didn't know about it. And Arnold was the big surprise. You know, there he was at the height of his film career, you know, taking time out. You know, it's never ceased to amaze me how loyal he does stay to bodybuilding. You know, I mean, he left New York, I don't know, 7 o'clock that night, got to Atlanta at 2. They had a police escort to the backstage, and he arrived. Bah, 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 bah. No, that's English sirens, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I concur.
And then for him to sort of be, you know, take the courteous way, we're all equals here, you know, we all won the Mr. Olympia, there's no pecking order, you know, it was tremendous. Yeah.
I think I remember seeing actually in the photograph that Dorian actually smiled in that picture as well.
Yeah, that was a moment to savor. Yeah, he wasn't that happy because he was still competing, you know.
Yeah.
And he was still committed to being in the contest. He came on in his tracksuit and said a few nice things about Joe, and then went back to concentrating on winning his 4th. Was it? Fourth. Yeah.
So which of the Mr. Olympias would you say either of you were closest to? John?
Closest to? What do you mean?
In terms of friendship or... Yeah, friendship.
Oh, Mr. Olympia winners.
Yeah.
I know Samir Bannout pretty good. Mm-hmm. I've interviewed Frank Zane. I've interviewed Chris Dickerson. I've interviewed Samir. Never got a chance to interview Franco. I don't really know Arnold. I met him a couple times, but I'm sure he doesn't know who I am. So I guess probably Samir, who I still have a relationship with today.
Peter?
Well, I mean, just by geographical circumstance, you know, Dorian Yates, I mean, I knew him before he won his first contest, and, you know, we became very close friends. You know, we're if I dare to say it, we're a bit similar. You know, we both got the same back development.
Everybody says that here.
He's got better lower lat insertions, definitely.
Right, yeah. They just like to see the back of me. Everybody says to me, I love seeing Peter McGough's back, you know. But anyway, you know, and we've spent a lot of time together before contests, talking and hanging around hotel rooms and stuff. But also, I got pretty close to Lee Haney. You know, I bonded with him from the first moments I saw him, and it's always been a warm relationship with him. You know, so you know, very lucky in some ways. But yeah, definitely just by the fact that we're from the same country and lived 40 miles apart. You know, I had more opportunities to mix with Dorian and follow him through the whole thing. You know, I mean, his last when he retired in '98, he announced his retirement at the '98 Olympia in Madison Square Garden.
It was FIBO, wasn't it? That he announced it. I thought it was FIBO. He announced it.
No, he announced it at the '98 Olympia. He told people he wouldn't be doing the '98 Olympia because of the tricep injury.
Oh, that
but
Olympia.
Then as he got,
it
would be back in '99.
Right.
But then as the year went on, he realised he wouldn't be able to do it, and he announced it from the stage at the beginning of the contest that Ronnie won. And I ended up backstage with him and his wife Debbie, and you know, that was '97, and our relationship had started in '85. I'd seen him at all the contests, and Debbie said to me, you know, only us three know exactly what he's gone through. You know, we were all there from the beginning, you know, and we've got to this point now where, you know, that's the end of that period of his life. Yeah. And the funny thing is, you see, we're British. We don't do this hugging and kissing and high-fiving thing. And that's the first time me and Dorian ever hugged when he retired. You know, even when he won, it was just a handshake. It wasn't a big, you know, my man's won, you know. It was, I look back at it as a very touching moment to say, yeah, there was only the three of us that were there right at the beginning and right at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say, like, Lee Haney and Dorian Yates are great champions now. on my podcast, when I asked them to do interviews, they were like, "Yep, right away," and they'll sit with you. I mean, I think Lee Haney talked to me for over 2 hours, and Dorian called me on the day of his wife's birthday and sat with me for an hour and a half. And they're just great champions that they'll and they're great interviews also, especially Dorian, who's become a lot more introspective about his career and about he can really talk about his feelings, his motivations, and his attitude during that time. He might have been kind of quiet during those years, but now that he's retired, he's really a great interview, and he's really someone great to talk to about bodybuilding.
John, where can we find those interviews?
Bodybuildinglegendshow.com is the website, and then I do the Bodybuilding Legends podcast each week on your local podcast station, Apple iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher.
Fantastic. So which one's your favorite? You can tell us.
Interviews?
Yeah, which one's your favorite?
I'll tell you, Boyer Coe is a great interview.
Was he?
He's very honest. He's got great stories. Every time I talk to him, he's got some really great stories. And he's got a great memory. He remembers all the little details. Like he told me the time he met Sergio Oliva at the Junior Mr. America, and they had to wait for the weightlifting contest to get over with before they could compete. And Sergio was much younger then, and he was only like 190 pounds, but they were all blown away by him. And they had a tape measure back there, and they measured his waist and his thighs, and his thighs were 28 and his waist was 27.
Wow.
Yeah,
Boyer Coe's a great guy. I remember I got to know him quite well when I moved to California in '92, and for the '92 Olympia, which was held in Helsinki, we'd hired a charter flight, and we all flew to Helsinki by way of Copenhagen, and I sat next to Boyer all the way. And the education he gave me about the history of bodybuilding, and he was always so honest. You know, a lot of guys, it's always a spin on them, you know, how they bring themselves into it. But Boyer is a true gentleman. He's honest as the day is long. And he was so interesting. You know, I was just fascinated by the whole conversation.
I agree.